Hey guys, welcome to vlog number 5, Finished Work Eschatology. This week we subtitle the lesson, The Trifold Question. And I want to deal with Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3. Let's read 1 and 2 leading into 3. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? 3 questions. Up until this moment, Jesus has only really mentioned the destruction of the temple. He has not mentioned the end of the age. He has not mentioned a second coming. He has not mentioned the end of the world. He has mentioned the judgment of the leaders of Israel in regards to their leadership, and he's repeatedly talked about the temple falling down. So whenever the disciples ask the trifold question, when will it happen? What's the sign of your coming, and what's the end of the age? They're asking about the same event. The reason I say this is because Jesus hasn't even mentioned the last two, his coming and the end of the age. Why would they ask about his coming and the end of the age at the same time they're asking, when will this other stuff happen? What made them do that? They make a connection, a natural connection, because they're a Jewish audience. And for them, the destruction of the temple has to be the end of their age. And to do that, it had to reflect the arrival of the Messiahship of whomever the Messiah was. Who do they think the Messiah is? We're talking about the disciples now privately talking to Jesus. They think the Messiah is Jesus. But for the Jewish world who expects a Messiah, what do they expect? We think as 21st century Christians, and we say, well, the Messiah was going to come and die on the cross and raise from the dead. That's not what a Jew would have said of the Messiah. They would have said the Messiah is going to come and redeem us from the yoke of these foreign armies and invaders, and is going to set himself up as the rightful king. So they accept Jesus as the Messiah, but they do not think he has yet come into his Messiahship. Jesus has a whole different idea. He's going to die on the cross for the sins of the world. He's going to raise from the dead. And he's going to move inside of their hearts. That's thinking way outside the box as far as they're concerned. So when he talks about the temple coming down, they make an assumption. And I know this because the trifold question is asked. They assume that if that temple comes down, then Jesus is coming into his Messiahship. They're not talking about a second coming. They're talking about the arrival of a Messiah. And they want to know what the signs are going to be that's going to happen when that age will come to an end. So it's amazing to me that they took the teaching and they put it right inside of their generation, right inside of their wheelhouse. Equally amazing is how often we take New Testament teaching, New Testament prophecies rather, and we transplant those prophecies into our day. You got to ask, where do we get the right? That's a phenomenal thing. So review quickly. The disciples ask, when are you going to do this? When's this going to happen? What's the sign of your coming? And what's the end of the age? And for them, it's all the same thing. And they're asking it because Jesus said the temple's coming down. If the temple comes down, their Messiah must be there. They think that's Jesus, but they don't think he's yet showing up as Messiah. So they're going, when's it going to happen? And they don't even see the cross. They don't even know the cross is coming, but that's on its way. Let's look at Israel's prophetic future in regards to how they would have viewed Israel's prophetic future, right? I hope I said that right. We'll try it again. Daniel chapter 8, verse 26. And the visions of the evenings and the mornings. This is God speaking to Daniel, what he's supposed to do. Take the visions of the evenings and the mornings, which was told, is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. Okay, so God's prophetic future for Israel is to be sealed up because it's many days out in the future. Paul to the Corinthian church, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse number 11. Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the end of the ages have come. Paul sees that he is living in the end of the ages. That's directly in line with what he knows Daniel said. The visions of Daniel refer to, Daniel 8:26, refer to many days in the future. So it's worth noting, I'm moving slowly here, very carefully. It's worth noting that Daniel's told to shut up the vision because it's many days from happening. How many days? Well, about 500 years between Daniel and Christ, maybe 550 or more between Daniel and the Apostle Paul, saying we're at the end of the ages. 500 plus years. Now, if you went backwards from right now, 500 years, you would be in the year 2015 minus 1550. Seems like a long time ago. Early 16th century. That's way back there. That's been a long time. That's the span between Daniel and Paul. And Daniel said, shut up. God told Daniel, shut up the vision because it's way out in the future. Revelation 22, verse number 10. And he said to me, do not seal the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. Now, I want you to see this. Daniel, seal it, because it's way out in the future. John, Revelation, don't seal it. Why? Because it's not way out in the future, it's at hand. Daniel seals a revelation that is 500 plus years from even happening. And he's told, that's way out there. Seal it up. 500 years seems way out there to me too. Revelation, God says, don't seal it up because it's about to happen. And it's been in dispensational eschatology terms, they think that the book of Revelation is still about to happen. That's been 2,000 years. What happened? Why does God think 500 years is a long time for Daniel, but 2,000 is not a long time from Revelation? No amount of time frame calisthenics is going to explain that properly, because it can't be explained unless Daniel's 500 years was truly a long time, but Revelation was about to happen in the lives of the people that Revelation was written to. And that would help explain why the book of Revelation was written to 7 churches who were in the middle of the greatest round of persecution the world had ever known against Christianity. And I know in this little instance we're jumping way ahead simply to help explain something here. Now, it'll prompt 50 questions from our audience. Can you explain this in Revelation, this in Revelation? Not yet. Not now. But I just want to let you see how the mindset was of the trifold questioning disciples, why they were thinking what they were thinking. They were seeing an unfurling of the book of Daniel happening in their midst. So the Jews would have said this. I don't want to get too far ahead. The Jews would have said in Jesus' day that there was a Mosaic age and a Messianic age. A lot of Jews would still say that to this day. The disciples are asking when that Mosaic age is going to end. And they know that when the Mosaic age ends, the Messianic age takes off from there. Where Christianity under dispensational eschatology has intruded is we say there's a Mosaic dispensation, and then the Messianic dispensation is way out here, and in between is what is the dispensation of grace. That's not necessarily how the Old Testament presented it. They had the Mosaic dispensation, and then Moses prophesies of the one who's coming. And so there's not that huge gap between the end of Moses and the arrival of Messiah. But the grace dispensation and the messianic dispensation, I believe, is taught as one and the same, and that's how a Jew would have said it. They wouldn't have seen it as the dispensation of grace, but as the messianic reign. So the disciples simply want to know, Jesus, when's the Mosaic end, and then when does the messianic begin? They believe Jesus is the Messiah, but they don't believe he's come into his messiahship because the temple's still standing. So they're saying, when's that going to happen? Let me show you how much the New Testament writers agree with them. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse number 1, followed by verse 2. God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in time past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son. In these last days. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 26. Jesus would then have had to suffer often since the foundation of the world, but now once, at the end of the age, he has appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 20. He indeed was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last days, these last times rather, for you. Jesus was manifest, made an appearance in these last times for you. Do not transport Hebrews 1:2, Hebrews 9:26, and 1 Peter 1:20 into your timeline. Because when they wrote them, they did not see them as a 2015 verse. They saw them as a verse relevant for their day, for their audience. They didn't think they were living in the end times, but they weren't. They knew they were living at the end of the Mosaic. They had met the Messiah, and they were planning on that messianic age taking over the age that they were in. Too often we put ourselves inside of these verses. People will get up and quote Hebrews 1:2, Hebrews 9:26. I've heard people say, the Bible says Jesus has appeared once at the end of the age to put away sin in himself. I'm telling you, we're in the end of that age. No, that doesn't even make sense. If it's the end of an age that 500 years before had been a long way off, and it's sealed up, and then there it is in front of them, and the disciples say, when is it going to happen, and how are we going to know? Let me give you a prime example that this is how the New Testament writers preached it. Not just how they wrote it, but how they preached it. It's how they interpreted it. We'll start with the New Testament. We'll go back to the source text from the Old. Acts chapter 2. The Apostle Peter is in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. And in verse 17, let's read 16. This is what was spoken by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, says God, that I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions. Your old men shall dream dreams. And on my men servants and on my maid servants I will pour out my spirit in those days, and they shall prophesy. And I will show wonders in heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood, fire, and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Now, I heard the first part of that a lot in Pentecost to try to explain what was going to happen with the gifts. And I heard the last part explained in Pentecost to show what was going to happen now that we had the gifts. Anybody that wanted to get saved could get saved. And I never heard anybody quote the part about the moon turning to blood, coming to the great and awesome day of the Lord, sun turning into darkness, blood, fire, vapor, smoke, signs in heaven, signs in the earth. And that doesn't have anything to do with blood moons. How do we know? Go to the source text. Joel chapter 2. Joel chapter 2 is where Peter is quoting from. Let's read in verse 28, beginning in verse 28, running through about 32. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. And on my men servants and my maid servants I will pour out my spirit in those days. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood, fire, pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be deliverance, as the Lord has said, among the remnant whom the Lord calls. Wow! Peter is actually quoting that in the last days, God is going to visit and deliver people, not deliver Jerusalem, but deliver people out of Jerusalem, which is going to mirror something Jesus will say in Matthew 24 about fleeing to the mountains of Judea. Now, since Jesus came in those last days, and he died in those last days, the end of the ages, the last days were there in the times of the disciples. And for those wondering what it means by whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved, it's not whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be a Christian. It was whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved from that destruction that was coming in those last days, that would be preluded by the signs and wonders in the heavens, which of course we will get to. Now, the trifold question was to identify a few things. It was to identify when the temple would fall down. It was to identify what signs would indicate that Jesus was now taking his place as Messiah. And it was to when those events would end the age that they were in. That's what the disciples are wondering. And they picked all of that up just out of Jesus' prelude parable and his speech to the Pharisees. So I say this, our end times sermons and songs and teachings and books really need reworked. I'll ask this. Did the disciples think the end of the age and the end of the world were the same thing? I don't know. If they thought that the end of the age was the end of the world, they never said it. And I think we all know they would have been wrong. I can't answer whether they did. But I think the imagery of the Old Testament about the reign of the Messiah and the end of the Mosaic economy was enough that they would not have had in their pericope the idea that the world was going to end. But if the temple's coming down, they would have had the idea that the world as they know it was going to end. And in that respect, they most certainly did. Next week, I want to deal with the fact that the disciples did not yet understand that Jesus was going to die or that Jesus was going to ascend. So how could they speak about a second coming? I tipped my hand a little bit in this one, that we'll go to that direction. Whenever they really did not believe he was yet reigning as Messiah in their timeline. And so if you want to read ahead at all, we're starting the work in the Matthew 24. We'll start there next week, but we'll also start to get into what I think is the crucial fourth verse, take heed that no one deceives you, a verse that has actually caused people to not listen to the teaching of the end times through a finished work lens like we're teaching it, because for 200 years, all they've heard is dispensational theology. That's right, only 200 years. But it's been all they've heard in their lifetime. And because they're so scared of being deceived, based on what Jesus said, they won't even entertain a thought that is anything different than they've ever known before. And I'll talk to you next week about why that is damaging us and what did Jesus mean when he said that. We'll go deeper as we go along. I hope you're enjoying the vlog series. This was number 5. Share it, pass it along. If you have a question, send us a question. If it's timely and it fits within that week's vlog category, we'll deal with it. Some of them we're pushing off to the future. Some of them I've ignored entirely because they're not even in regards to what's going on the vlog. So check us out. We hope that you're blessed. We'll see you next week.